On March 4th, 1857, outside the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., Democrat James Buchanan took the oath of office. He spoke of a landmark decision soon to be handed down by the Supreme Court on the issue of slavery. Whatever the court ruled, Buchanan said, Americans must accept it as a final settlement of the controversy. 2 days later, the Supreme Court handed the South a complete victory. The court ruled that Dred Scott, a Missouri slave whose master had taken him into free territories, could not thereby claim his freedom. Enslaved Africans could never be citizens, the court insisted. The most explosive part of the ruling declared that Congress could not ban slavery in any Western territory. The court held that doing so would violate the property rights protected by the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Northern anti-slavery forces roared in anger, both against the ruling and against the new president who had pre-endorsed the decision. They accused Buchanan of caving in to the South on the moral issue of slavery, and even that he had advanced knowledge of the ruling. Buchanan had indeed been secretly tipped off by a friend on the court. If Buchanan believed his approval of the Dred Scott decision and his hands-off approach to the spread of slavery would settle the controversy, he was sorely mistaken. The president's course divided the Democrats and fueled the new Republican Party, a northern organization dedicated to stopping the spread of slavery. The rising star in the Republican Party was a young senator from Illinois. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln won the White House. In response to Lincoln's election, 7 southern states seceded from the Union. They created their own nation, the Confederate States of America. While Buchanan argued that the president had no constitutional power to combat secession, Lincoln believed otherwise. Lincoln stretched the powers of the presidency to his understanding of the constitutional limits. Lincoln always opposed slavery as immoral. He believed it contradicted the Declaration of Independence and made a mockery of American founding principles. He staunchly defended the right of African Americans to enjoy the fruits of their own labor. Lincoln refused to back down from his opposition to the spread of slavery into the territories, even when guns fired at Fort Sumter. He consulted with cabinet members and discussed extensively with other advisors. After the Union victory in the Battle of Antietam in September, he decided to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. It did not free all the slaves, but it did change the meaning of the war. Emancipation soon became not just a war measure, but a moral imperative. Lincoln explained the North's expanded war aims in his Gettysburg Address. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. With the defeat of the Confederacy at hand, 2 problems remained for Lincoln. He still had doubts about emancipation's constitutionality, and blacks remained in bondage in the slave states loyal to the Union. Both problems were solved by the 13th Amendment ending slavery, which the president pushed through Congress. In his second inaugural address, Lincoln called the war God's punishment on America for the sin of slavery. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. He was assassinated just weeks later. Andrew Johnson of Tennessee, who had been vice president for only 6 weeks, claimed he would follow in Lincoln's footsteps, but he actually went in a different direction. Johnson had grown up a poor white Democrat from the mountains of East Tennessee. He disliked rich planters, African Americans, and a strong federal government. He believed blacks were intellectually inferior to whites. He saw the poor whites of the South as the real victims of slavery, believing that slave labor helped the rich stay rich and made it impossible for poor farmers to have a better life. Johnson opposed the 14th and 15th Amendments, which granted citizenship and suffrage to African Americans, respectively. He believed it was unconstitutional to ratify amendments when former Confederate states had no representation in Congress. Johnson used the veto to block the Freedmen's Bureau and other Reconstruction measures. The Republicans impeached him, but the conviction fell 1 vote short of the 2/3 majority required to remove him from office. Owing partly to Johnson's encouragement, the South resisted any degree of black equality. Reconstruction thus became a sad chapter in American history, in which African Americans of the South briefly attained rights, only to see them swept away until the Civil Rights Movement nearly 100 years later.